We're back with more on the breaking news. A former Port Authority official says evidence exists tying Christie to having knowledge of the lane closures during the period when the lanes were closed. That directly contradicts what the governor has said. The new claim comes from the lawyer for David Wildstein, the man who implemented the lane closings. Wildstein's lawyer did not disclose the evidence. Christie's office released a statement saying he had absolutely no prior knowledge of the lane closures before they happened. Let us bring in former U.S. Attorney Kendall Coffee and criminal defense attorney Brian Weiss. Thank you both for being here tonight.
Hey, thanks for inviting us.
Kendall, Mr. Wildstein's attorney says evidence exists tying the governor to having knowledge of the lane closures. Legally, what could this mean for the governor?
Well, it could be a bombshell or a bombshell bluff. What we know is that Wildstein has an extraordinary campaign trying to market himself as a cooperator, as a potential star witness to the prosecution. And apparently his attorney isn't satisfied that the prosecution is willing to offer the kind of deal or the kind of interest that Wildstein would want in order to open up. But it all comes down to not what we're reading in the papers or what is being said through an attorney. What really is the evidence? And Wildstein may have knowledge. He may be able to put the pieces together. He could be that gold standard cooperator that the government would like to have, especially if he can take them to some documents and other corroboration. But right now, all we've got is something that's intriguing prosecutors, not necessarily helping them make a case against Governor Christie.
Now, Brian, the fact is you have two things here. You have Wildstein, who was denied the use of that they would pay for an attorney to Port Authority, and you have his quest for immunity. But we don't know what the evidence is, and we don't know what Wildstein wants immunity from, because it would seem to imply there was something unethical or illegal done that Wildstein's trying to save himself from.
And I think, Al, that's the $64,000 question. Was it illegal or was it unethical? I'm still not convinced at this point necessarily that Bridgegate, as we've been calling it, is anything other than Jersey politics as usual, with guys who have pretty much wrecked Chris Christie's presidential aspirations. But I think what's critical at this point is that, is Waldstein looking for a deal? Absolutely. Is his lawyer somebody who has a reputation, is fashioning these kinds of high-profile deals? Sure. But we don't want this to turn into a bad Law and Order episode where the investigative committee, or worse yet, Paul Fishman, the U.S. attorney, ultimately offers the wrong guy the deal. You don't want to buy a pig in a poke. And right now, David Waldstein is suggesting, look, I am the appetizer, but I can ultimately lead you to a pretty juicy entree, guys.
And that's the point, Kendall, because we would assume that Mr. Wildstein's lawyer would not be doing all this maneuvering unless there was something that Wildstein did not want to be exposed to. But the question becomes, is Wildstein trying to save himself from something that really does not, becomes detrimental legally to the governor or whoever the investigators are looking at?
Well, I think there clearly is criminal exposure here. Not necessarily under the federal law. We have to see how that plays out. But New Jersey's got criminal statutes for official misconduct that if the allegations are proven, somebody's in a lot of trouble. State law. Right. And I think Wildstein's got to be mighty concerned because the extraordinary efforts to create, in effect, a case in the court of public opinion complaining about the prosecution not talking to him, not giving him immunity. Normally, as we all know, these kind of deals are worked out quietly. You're not running around in front of the press saying, boy, why won't they talk to me? Why won't they grant me immunity? You're kind of sharing your information and making different sort of offers of what you can prove and negotiating behind the scenes with prosecution. That's not happening here, at least not with respect to Wildstein, which tells us that for whatever reasons, the prosecution is not ready to give him any kind of immunity.
Brian, if you were representing Wildstein and you were throwing out these offers, as Kendall just said, that the prosecutors are seemingly not willing to bite, at least as of yet, on giving immunity, what would be your next step?
I think the next step, Al, is to let either the investigative body in the Jersey legislature or Paul Fishman in his investigation, that he can fill in the blanks, the pieces of the puzzle. And it's interesting that you channeled Watergate with what did the governor know and when did he know it, because I'm having this flashback 40 years ago to John Dean ultimately being the first piece in the puzzle that brought down a president. If I'm David Waldstein, I will let whomever I need to let know. I am the man. I am the guy who knows far more than anybody in this entire imbroglio. And I'll tell you the truth, and when this morality tale is over, I could ultimately give you the governor or Bridget Kelly or the Avon lady. At the end of the day, I'm the guy that you want to talk to. Let's make this happen.
What happens at the end of, how does this end in your judgment, Kendall? Where does it go from here?
We don't know, of course, where it's going to go because we don't know what the evidence is. But there's another impact of what Wildstein is doing. In addition to trying to get the prosecutor's attention, he's getting the attention of other lawyers for other potential suspects and witnesses. Why is that important? If you're going to be a cooperator at some point, you want to be the first one in. And sometimes there's almost a rush to make the deal with the prosecutors, because to be the sixth person that cooperates with the government is a whole lot worse than being number one or two. That's another dynamic. Believe me, the other lawyers for other potential targets are having conversations with their clients right now about whether or not they need to think about making a deal at some point.
Brian, what kind of evidence could he bring in? Email, I mean, what could he bring in?
Well, the subpoena essentially asks all of these folks for any electronically stored data, emails from their office computer, from their iPads, from their tablets, from their smartphones, phone logs, Post-it notes, text messages, anything that can provide pieces of the puzzle involving what everybody now believes is an ever-expanding investigation into whether or not Krris Kристi and his minions, as Kendall pointed out, may have violated New Jersey law, if not federal law.
Now, Kendall, wouldn't at some point, if the investigator statewide, if the federal prosecutor does not come through with immunity, wouldn't then Wildstein be forced to at least publicly then try and infer or leak what kind of evidence he claims to have? I mean, what does he have if everybody says, we're not giving you immunity, we're not convinced?
And the prosecutors may give him immunity months from now, but apparently they're not willing to do it right now. They also think that they're going to be able to get his records. The Fifth Amendment protects testimony. It doesn't really protect records of pre-existing information that already exists. So maybe you don't have to open up your mouth, but you generally got to open up your records. And lawyers will, good defense lawyers will, pose some objections on a very complicated legal doctrine under the Fifth Amendment called act of production. But sooner or later, prosecutors think that they can get through that and that they don't really need to make a deal with somebody to get subpoenaed records, because those are records that they already think they're entitled to have legally.
Kendall, Coffee, and Brian Weiss, thank you both for your time. Coming up, we'll have reaction from New Jersey Congressman Frank Pallone and a New Jersey State Assemblyman whose district was affected. And we'll look at Krris Kristi's own words leading up to today's news.
I had no knowledge of this, of the planning, the execution, or anything about it. And then I first found out about it after it was over. And even then, what I was told was that it was a traffic study. And there was no evidence to the contrary until yesterday that was brought to my attention or anybody else's attention.